Right.
I would rather.
We found like a journey.
Just go early or something. But I want to be.
Want to be a guru. Yeah, you want to like.
Because they were already like ready to like start it. I'm like,
You're like, goodbye.
yeah, I was like, no, seriously, it really was like that. We were like, an interview process already, like interviewing people. Like that. I really don't want to be here at all.
You guys are
I'm not ready to leave.
It just wasn't like kind of, at least what I'm looking for.
Right.
So I'm like, I'd rather learn.
Oh.
On video.
You care which? No. I guess we're taking these two.
Yeah,
The microphone.
this being
We're live, right?
There's some remote students. I just wanted to make sure they were on.
You're live when you're ready. So just let me know. So come on, just let me know.
Sure, give me 1 second. I'm going to just put up these. Okay, so I'm going to just switch it to this right here. So I just have a list of questions that Rosa came up with for you guys. I mean, you could talk about whatever you want.
Yeah.
But you could use this as a starting point. First of all, let's give it up for our speakers, guys. Thank you so much for coming in. I mean, we teach data analytics here and data science, but having people that practice it, live in it every day, it's important for the students to kind of like get that. So thank you so much for coming here and giving us your time. Yeah. So go ahead, guys. You can introduce yourselves and
Cool.
Go ahead.
All right. My name is Jake Rogers. I actually don't practice data science or data analytics, but I am the head of HR for a company called Tenor. We're a Series B startup, but we are hiring lots of data people all over, data engineers, data analysts, data scientists, and been hiring people like that for a few years now. So I might have a little bit of a different perspective in terms of I can be helpful maybe in job hunt advice and kind of talking about what we look for from a small company perspective. I haven't worked at one of those big companies recruiting data analysts or data engineers or data scientists or anything, but yeah, that's my background. I also started a company before this and had freelance for multiple Series A startups. So I've been in kind of the small startup world for a little while now.
Hi, my name is Sean Ryan. I'm an investor and advisor for early stage tech startups. I may get involved again in early stage growth companies. My history has been as a VP of engineering or a CTO. So I've done a lot of hiring in early stage companies that are going through growth. And so that's my background.
that's awesome. So what led you to like your current role and where you are right now? Like from you started talking about your history.
Yeah.
Like so, how did you get to recruiting data?
Oh my God, that's a long story. I'll give the short version though. So I graduated college and I actually went into government. I was in Washington, D.C., but I was doing tech in government, which is a little less exciting. If you want to do big data or like cutting edge work, it's probably not the place to go. It depends where you're working though. I don't want to make any blanket statements here. The government needs smart, good, talented people. But yeah, I mean, I got a little bored with it and ended up coming back here, starting a company that raised a seed round and kind of realized the importance of getting really quality people in the door very quickly, because that was one of the hardest things to do as a young startup. And so after that kind of eventually fizzled out, and we jumped ship into another opportunity where we just started helping other companies build teams, and worked for multiple startups in that capacity, and it was a really good time. We brought in one of my friends who was one of the Google Ventures recruiters, and then I joined Tenor, and I was the 14th employee there. We're now 50 people, and throughout it's just been the time data and understanding data and making sense of the data you have is king right now. It's critical for a company's success. Everyone's trying to be data driven, but it's a lot easier to say you're going to be data driven than put it into action. So, I think most companies have pretty big data needs overall.
That's really interesting, going from government to recruitment. That's
It's
recruiting
very
data
different.
scientists. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Sean, go ahead.
My story is even longer, only because I'm older. So when I got out of school, I went into consulting for Accenture, and we did technology consulting for Fortune 500 companies. And just to give you a sense, the Netscape was brand new, right? Like literally brand new. Somebody showed it to me and was like, "This connects to the whole world." And I'm like, "Through what? A phone line? How does this all work?" Right? And it was really brand new back then. In any case, I came out here to a web conference. I was from the Midwest, and realized that we got the web hooked up to the database, which the web was not hooked up to a database at the time. You couldn't connect to a data store. So it was just kind of static pages. A lot of people thought of it as a library. I realized that as soon as they started connecting web pages to data stores, that's literally where all our applications would live. And I joined a startup called Digital River, which was a commerce platform, which is still around today. I was maybe, you were saying, 15th employee. We went through rounds of funding and IPO'd. It was interesting back then. People didn't believe that anybody would put their credit card online, or that anybody would buy online. And people were saying, "Well, I love going to the store," right? But in any case, it was interesting to watch ideas change. And now it's probably hard for you guys to even imagine not believing that you could buy stuff online. But I remember going to parties and telling my friends, "No, everybody's going to be buying online someday." But on the heels of that IPO, I joined another company called ExactTarget, which was recently bought by Salesforce here in the city. And I was the fourth guy there, and invested a little bit, and was the CTO, and helped kind of build that platform for 5 years. And we didn't have the cloud then. We were building applications all on our own hosted systems. ExactTarget did email marketing, as I said, and that was a neat kind of success. It went through an IPO and then subsequently got acquired. And I have, subsequent to that, I've been involved in a few companies that have been acquired, a couple that have just run out of money and we shut them down. And, and I've worked in a whole bunch of different technology stacks. So
That's really interesting that you're talking about, you saw the future, right? So when everyone else was saying, I remember that time.
Yeah.
Because I was fooling around with HTML.
Yeah.
Back then, my dad told me, go back to the books. I was like really young then. So a lot of people didn't believe in it. What did you so you saw before before databases that there would be databases.
yeah, so
Connecting to web pages. How did you make that connection?
well, so the web conference I came to, and this will be hard for you guys to imagine, it was a bunch of webmasters back then. Everybody called themselves a webmaster, and you were responsible for the static pages that got served off some server. And the what you served was just kind of a brochureware of what your company was and the products you sold. And there was no real functionality to it. And I can't even remember the acronym, but it was interesting because, you know, I was coming to it as a how to build applications for business, and everybody in the web conference was kind of like marketing and how do we put up pages that describe our company.
Oh, interesting.
And they had just figured out what, you know, they just introduced the technologies. Again, I can't remember the acronym, the technologies that allowed you to connect to a data store through a service. And, you know, so once you plug in a relational database behind the web pages, you can make them do everything that they do today, you know. But yeah, it was very clear, you know, and I even went back. So I'm at Accenture, I'm a senior manager, and I went back to all my partners at the company and I was like, we've got to get in on this. We've got to figure out applications for businesses because they're connecting to databases now. And if you secure the pages, now you can have applications anywhere you need them, right? Everything that we live today, which is awesome. And I remember the partners just shaking their head going, you know, the web was kind of a dumpster fire back then. It was, you know, people were using blinking red fonts everywhere, and you know, it was pretty ugly. You know, it's much better looking today.
I'm sorry for contributing to that.
Yeah, well, I did too for a while.
So interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Would you like to tell us about yourself and how you got to your current position that you're at right now?
Sure, I'll try my best. Okay, so guys, my name is Ankit. I am the lead architect at Samsung Electronics America. Samsung has 3 CEOs, so I'll just concentrate on the electronics aspect. I'm one of the lead architects on the Big Data Stack platform. And my story is a little different, shorter one. So way back, I think I was starting to work with, so I started as a developer, or a normal developer working on Java and all that kind of stuff. And then in 2008, when I started to work with a startup in Pennsylvania, that's where Hadoop got started in 2007, and I was one of the earliest adopters of it in 2008. So we were working with a startup, and their data was about to grow, wherein people were trying to load the data in the database, and it was taking like 8 hours. Is it crazy to work on something and somebody is just loading for the 8 hours? So then during my research, we figured out, okay, let's start using, so Amazon also started at the same time. We started using, so how many of you have heard about EMR? Okay, yeah, so that's one thing you got to read. That's a mantra to be successful in big data because it's changing so fast. I'll concentrate on big data, by the way. So we started using, so EMR is Elastic MapReduce, wherein you can essentially pay-per-use machines you can borrow from Amazon, pay it, and you can destroy whenever you're done with the work. Not destroy per se, but essentially they will be killed if you're using Amazon from their perspective. So you don't have to pay if you're not working on it. You can just shut that down. So that's where my Hadoop journey started. And then after that, I moved on to Adobe, really big empire, a lot of machines. But then after that, in 2011, I joined Yahoo, and that's where everything turned around. Yahoo was one of the iconic companies, right, as you're all aware, and one of the largest clusters in the world, 30,000 nodes, what I have worked on. Blessed to be part of teams like that. And essentially, so Marissa was the CEO when she joined in 2012. I was there, and they picked up top 1% of the company based on the whatever the so-called ranking. And they interviewed, I think, 1,000 people. 40 people were selected to work on that charter. We had to complete a project from 0 to 100% in 43 days. So that was a charter. And we knew it's going to be tough. So the charter was almost like 18 to 19 hours a day we were kicking in. And that's an important thing. You got to know that. Essentially, it all depends on the passion. So nobody is going to be pushing you because they were interviewing and they kind of kept the term that this is what the stuff is. And if we work together, we can get it done. So we were put together in, I think, a little bit bigger than this room. Pretty much. We were not sleeping there. That's the only thing we were not doing. Pretty much everything. We were just in fishbowl and just kicking off 18, 19, 20, whatever. A couple of days we were just sleeping on the desk. But that was the goal, and we grew that project in 2 years from zero to $1 billion plus dollar run rate. So that was one of the biggest accomplishments of my life, and I think blessed to be part again. Again, it all comes with passion. If you're passionate, you can, I think, do good things and you can turn around things. So that's where my journey took a total turnaround because, I mean, essentially, Adobe was a very good company, startup was good, but again, the scale, I have never seen this massive scale, like 30,000 machines in front of me. Well, not everything in front of me because we have several data centers, but largely I had the access to pretty much any machine because I was one of the lead platform developers there. So we got that project, and this year, earlier this year, I joined Samsung as the lead architect. So that's the short version of the story.
Wow. It's incredible. Sounds like long days. Sounds like an all-nighter before final for a very long time.
Absolutely. But you learned a lot.
Sure.
I learned a lot, and everybody in the team kind of learned, and we got together. So everybody was rewarded with something or the other. The whole team was went to Hawaii and other stuff. So those were the perks that came in later. But when you start, you don't know about those, right? So essentially, what you don't know. But it all came by passion.
Great. So the next question, and guys, if you want to say anything you want, whatever you want to say. And if you guys have questions, obviously just raise your hand and ask.
Feel free to throw around, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is about you guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's, we want you guys to get the answer you need. So
Sure. And by the way, I'm hiring.
There you go.
Well, the next question is, what do you like most about your current role? So maybe we could go back around.
Oh, starting here. Okay. Well, so in my career, I really enjoyed building product and building software people were going to use and watching people use it and seeing how much they liked using it, and building teams that built that software. Is really kind of gratifying. Now, unless I get back involved in active building, what I get to do is sit down with early stage entrepreneurs, understand their ideas, help provide input that may allow them to avoid kind of mistakes that I've made in the past or that I've been a part of, and hopefully help people be more successful a little bit more quickly. It's a lot of fun to talk to early stage companies that are looking for funding, that have ideas, that have the passion, and are really trying to build a company where they can knock the ball out of the park.
That's awesome. Yeah, and a lot of companies just need advice from people who've seen mistakes and seen success, and can guide them in those ways. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I'll share with you guys, and I'm interested in your perspectives. I came out here from the Midwest, and in the Midwest, when we were building software, you hear about the mythology of Silicon Valley, and the one thing that was kind of trained into me is what you build, people have to like it. You have to serve your customers and build good product. And when I came out here, there was so much energy and action going on. I think at times people forgot that there were customers because there was a lot of money flowing into businesses that hadn't quite gotten traction. And, I would encourage anybody who's getting involved in, as you guys move on with your careers, gut check the idea. Make sure that it's something that you think is a great idea, that people are going to really love. Because that way, when you get involved, you can give it the passion and the work and know that you're working toward building something really valuable. So.
All that.
Sure. Okay, I have two things I really like about what I do. One is, obviously, I'm in charge of filling roles in the company and making sure we take care of the needs. So in some ways, I get to watch people suffer until they get the help they need, and then all of a sudden, someone great comes in and makes things easier, and you see something come to life, right? Like, we recently did it with our design team, and we recently did it with our data team. Just scaled the team from 1 to 2 people to 2 to 5, right? And it makes a huge impact, and all of a sudden, things are getting done, and you see this explosion of productivity. It's this amazing thing to watch, especially from my perspective. I got to talk to them on that first phone call, get them excited about what we're doing, and then see them really give the process their all, and then join and then give give their all to the work that they're trying to do. So that's obviously, I like that. That's why I'm in the profession I'm in. The other thing is I work for a company that is maybe a little, I think sometimes a little under the radar. Tenor is essentially, we're a GIF search and share platform. We make it so you can send short videos, GIFs, right? Who here sends GIFs? Any of you guys? Okay, that's pretty good. So we do that for Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Kick Messenger and Slack and WhatsApp, and we have an insane amount of data. We every time I talk to people, when they hear our numbers, it's just GIFs are kind of blowing up right now, for lack of a better term. We have 35 billion GIFs sent every month, and people are searching emotional terms. I was just talking to him about this. We can correlate emotions to different events happening in different regions of the world. And so we're seeing this crazy data around how people are reacting to things. And we also, like during the election, you could see red states versus blue states reacting to elections and the terms they look for and how they try to encapsulate their frustration or their excitement. And it's really interesting. It's just, there's a lot of data and there's a lot of cool things out there. So the other thing I really like is working for a company like these guys are saying, where we have a product that's being used constantly. And you guys use it maybe, our average user sends, I think, about 8 GIFs per day, but it's very ubiquitous right now. And there's a whole bunch more going on behind the scenes for us. We're essentially trying to build a visual search engine. So the technical problems are deep. And when you get a good engineer who wants to work on something like that where it's at a really big scale, or with machine learning or natural language processing, or just trying to understand this massive data set, you get a lot of people who are really passionate. And so I love to see that brought into the interviews and also into the work.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't even think about the motions across things and correlating that to events.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Pretty wild.
And could you share?
Yeah. It only goes so far, but
Yeah, it's about Tenor.
Yeah.
So are you guys who do like the keyboards for like companies who like Facebook, where they have like the GIF keyboard push up on?
Yeah.
Is that your
the
keyboard?
GIF button. Yeah, when you click that, it accesses our API.
Okay.
So we do that for over 300 companies at this point.
That's insane.
Yeah, so if you think about it, you go back to the old days when we used to use semicolons and parentheses to make emojis, and now the emoji button is literally on every smart device out there, right? You pretty much can't avoid the emoji button being on something where you're typing. And we look at ourselves as maybe the next evolution of that. It's a communication form in some ways, and if we can do it intelligently, we'll achieve that with our users, right? They'll look at us, and that same light, but potentially a lot more potent, right? With a lot more capabilities. So yeah.
Well, so essentially, again, my answer will be towards the passion that you bring into the job, and I bring in that passion. So at Samsung, this is the first time that so our team is acting as a catalyst, and they never had a big data team earlier, given the size of Samsung. It's one of the top 10 companies in the world, and the amount of data that we have. There were some efforts, but again, they were all silo efforts, not really a concentrated effort. So right now, my manager was hired, I think, last year, and I was hired February of this year. So we started together putting a team for our e-commerce platform, and the amount of data is insane. So we are still trying to take baby steps as to onboard all the data. And again, it requires a lot of patience. And the key part here, because when I was moving away from Yahoo, I had multiple offers, but there were some companies which were big. Maybe I may not have been able to put that much of impact, but here we were building everything from scratch, so I accepted, and I wanted to bring in again a culture wherein we are able to bring in fresh ideas. And so as far as my team is concerned, I tell them to make mistakes as much as they want, and let's kind of learn and put together a culture wherein we are able to help others at Samsung, because Samsung is a big company. We are starting this effort in the electronics department, and then we will move on and so on and so forth.
That's great. So it sounds like you like growing a team and really like, rolling up your sleeves and getting stuff done.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the whole purpose. I mean, essentially, when I was working at Yahoo, we're working as a small startup inside there, but not all the time you get in big companies that kind of environment. The same thing here in Samsung. It's a very big company, but again, we are working as a small startup, and we are putting together. So he started with 2 people. Now we're like, I think, 40 in the team in 1 year, 1.5 years. So, we have our team in India. We have our team across US. So,
It's really interesting you said that. I joined a team that was similar. It was a big company, and very small team doing big things. It was just random that I found that position. It was ideally my position, but it was just random. Do you have any tips on like how they can find a position like that? Like a big company with lots of resources, but a small team that's growing. Like, do you have any tips on like how to find that?
First thing is your LinkedIn profile should be on it, and you should have the best URL. So in LinkedIn, there is an option you can customize the URL. So I don't know how many people know about it. So you can go into the profile, edit, and you can put in. So if you look at in LinkedIn, my profile, it's Ankit-Big Data. So you can just make it simple so that people can reach out to you. And even without me looking for companies, so I had like 40, 50 recruiters contacting me last year when Yahoo was being bought by Verizon. So a lot of my colleagues, and they were all reached out. But again, the key here is to have the simplest URL in LinkedIn so that people can reach out. But again, don't accept the first offer that you get. See if you are in a comfortable position, try to evaluate that and see which one makes sense. And always ask good questions in the interview. When they are asking questions at the end of the interview, thank the hiring manager and ask good questions. Then you will know which company you want to work with, because you will see the passion.
That's great. Love that. Our next question is like what's something that you wish you knew when you started out? It's funny you said you started your own company. I started my own company, Raise Around. I didn't even know what KPI was, and no one told me ever. And I just figured it out. Like, it took me a year, but I figured it out. And then I started doing better. But what's one thing that you guys wish you knew when you were starting out that you know now?
Want me to start?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Mine's pretty simple. I think I already pretty much said it, so won't spend too much time on it. But if you're joining a company or if you're starting a company, either way, I think it ties into passion, but I think team is paramount. A good team is passionate. A good team is talented. A good team is smart. A good team has mentorship. It has all of that. The people are going to be who you're dealing with. I mean, you're obviously going to be doing your work on a computer, as we all do now, but surround yourself with good people. I think that's where my first company fell short a little bit. We had dedicated people, but maybe not the top talent that we needed to get things off the ground. And with Tenor, when I joined them, the people that they had there in the beginning are still there. And they are the people that took us from 1 million iOS users to 50 plus million. And they carried a lot of weight and they worked long hours. They were thoughtful about what they did. They showed passion. They showed all of that. And they're really the glue of the company still. I think you find that with a lot of successful companies. Those founding teams, those founding members that were able to make big things happen, stick around, they care still, and they stay engaged. So find a team that you feel like has that going on. That'd be my first thing. The biggest thing I think I was missing, and also the biggest thing that I wish I knew. I think you know it in some sense, but you have trouble identifying it in the proper way. So it's a lot easier, for instance, to find that in an existing company rather than build it from scratch.
Oh, sure.
And so, but also even when you're joining a company, I feel like I almost lucked out. I mean, I only met with the founders. I was blown away by their vision. I was blown away by how they thought, and I assumed the rest of the team would be the same, and I safely assumed. But maybe should have met with more people. But it worked out, right? So I wish I had dug a little bit deeper, but yeah, and that would be my advice to other people, is just get to know that team as much as you can, which also ties back to asking good questions.
That's really incredible. So just one thing you said that was really interesting for you guys, I think, is the founding team there still? That's kind of incredible. If you're at a company and the founding members are there still and they're still active and participating and still passionate and driven.
Yeah.
I think that's something important. And it's much harder to grow that, right? Because you need a lot of money to hire really top talent.
Right.
And just to convince them to join
Right.
is very difficult.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and a founding team that's not there, I mean, unless the company is like 10 or 15 years plus, it could lead to some red flags, right? Like, are there disagreements? Is there someone who's a real jerk among the whole group, right? Like, it should bring up good questions. As obviously, with enough time, people will say, "Oh, I'm ready for a new challenge." But a lot of our founding members are there because they still believe it, and there's a lot of work left to do. We haven't like been acquired or IPO'd or anything yet. So I think we still feel like the biggest things are ahead of us.
That's amazing, coming from where you guys are right now.
Yeah.
Wonder what that is.
Yeah.
What was the question again? It was
one thing that you wish
wish I had
you
known.
knew
Yeah.
that you know now.
That Bitcoin was going to go to like $5,000.
It's 8,000 now.
8,000. So, well, I think I'll tag on to what you were saying. I'm kind of, I was in consulting, and then I got into startups as an engineer. Okay, I was director of engineering at this commerce platform. So I was really focused on building software, and I was less focused on the team than I could have been, and probably less focused than I should have been. And because in my mind, it was all about building the software, right? So it was kind of very transactional. And we had a great team, and we had a good company, and it grew and IPO'd, all good stuff. But now I realize how small the world is. And had I known, I would have spent way more time with the people and building better relationships and expanding my network. And because I realize now, with some of the different companies I've been involved in, I almost can't be in a room and meet somebody new and mention one of them, and they know people there, they know the company, they know, and so I think to kind of summarize that is, really focus on the team. So if you're looking at going into a business, and I would say this based on personal experience, really vetting the people matters. There are really high energy, successful, great teams and companies you can get involved in. And then there are some that may look that way, but if you dig and ask the good questions, you realize that people aren't necessarily very happy, or they don't feel challenged, or they don't feel maybe appreciated, and you can kind of get a feel for that. And I think there's enough. You guys could push back and tell me if I'm wrong. I think there's enough great opportunities in the Bay Area right now that you could probably really make sure you find a great group. And if you gel well with that group, and you're building something that you really like, it's great. It's a great feeling. You're going to love it, and it's going to be great for your careers.
You have a question?
Yes. Maybe I can ask both of you. So you said in your company you're looking for the people who are passionate about the work and the data you're working with, right? Whereas in the startup side, they don't want people who are passionate about data. They want like geniuses. So if we are in the job search, so what should be our approach or strategies to look for the jobs? So like if I'm a job searcher, like I'm a candidate, I want to be on the job where I can feel challenged, I can choose my previous skills and even grow with the job. And it's very different if you find jobs in the big companies and find jobs in the startups. Like, what should be the approach, or how should we move ahead with this?
It's an interesting question.
I can answer. Yeah. So how many of you know Jack Ma? Everybody knows Jack Ma, right? And read about him, how many times he was rejected, right? He never gave up. And now you see his single stay. He turned around. So I was in China a year back, and Alibaba is pretty much everywhere. Amazon is nothing as compared to Alibaba. So the key is, if there are companies, like I said, don't just accept the first offer that you get. If you are comfortable, keep the top companies that you want to be hired at the end. Start with low ballers if you think. But again, you could find better companies as well. So again, it depends on the hiring manager, and again, the questions that you ask, and you should always ask good questions, right? Probing questions, you should always ask. Like, I was talking to a candidate, and I asked, forget about all the technical stuff. Tell me what was the last book you read. And the person didn't read any book in recent times. That's a red flag, right? At least you should be reading something. Even if you're not reading, you should be reading something online, right? So I think that's how at least I evaluate. There are n number of patterns. People ask programming questions and all that kind of stuff. That's the later part, like on-site and all that. But to start, again, to answer your question, you should always look for companies you are comfortable with. And again, the rhythm should match between you and the hiring manager.
So I want to clarify your question a little. I think that was a little bit of the big company perspective. Hopefully I can offer something different, but you're trying to figure out how you can better yourself as an applicant for an opportunity where you can be passionate, but also apply your old skills and grow. Is that right? Am I doing that right? Am I getting that? All right. So I think you do have to be picky. I think it's a lot easier said than done, because job hunts can be a slog. They could be hard, and you get that offer and you're like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore, right? It's just, you think you want to do it. And, unless you did ask really good questions and you have a high degree of confidence, you should maybe keep looking. and not just take the first offer. Confidence is hard to build. You have to get to know the team. You have to ask good questions. You have to dig into are they successful? Are they about to lay off a bunch of people? There's plenty of startups that for some reason hire a bunch of people and then just quickly lay everyone off. And who knows why they are hiring. But you got to be smart about it. You got to dig into it. And from a candidate perspective, what you can do is try. These things are going to sound very generic, but I think you got to be true to yourself. I think a lot of candidates, and this happens with us all the time. You have candidates who come in and they try to fit themselves into some position that didn't necessarily match, but they have some of the right skill sets. And then you get to the end of the discussions, and someone on our team has figured out that this isn't really what they want to do in the long run. And so you have to also represent yourself in a way that's true to yourself. And then when you do know what your passions are, passions plural, I think in this world and day and age, there's too many things to say that you have one passion. There's a lot of things you guys can be doing, but work on something for it. Just as you had this great question about what's a book you read recently, I usually go to what's something that you're doing on your own, especially if you're coming out of a program like this. I think I often look for people that are taking on things on their own or looking at our problem and trying to do something that applies to it. We actually just hired a data scientist who went through Insight Data Science. No, nothing against you guys. All these programs are doing good things. He's a former PhD candidate, and he spent endless amounts of time thinking about our problem. And we also give a data challenge where we give a sample of our data set. And he sent in the report and then clearly spent an entire another week digging into the data. And he came in and the team was just wowed. They were like, this guy's young, he's junior, we know we're gonna have to train him, but he is passionate about the data. He knows what he wants to do. He knows the problems that we're facing, and he's not even part of the company. He's really sat down and thought about the problems that he wants to take on here. And he was realistic about them. So it seemed like he really was thoughtful about representing what he wanted and also showing that to us. And that's the perfect combo. It took him a lot of effort, but he identified it and he was very thoughtful and meticulous. And that's the thing you can do that will give you the best shot with any company. So that's my best advice.
So I have a question that adds on to that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that this candidate really spoke to the challenge that you guys were facing and tried to apply everything to that. How was he able to understand what your challenges were?
Yeah. Well, so like I said, our data challenge, we give a kind of a sanitized sample of our data set. So he had some of our live data, and not all companies will do that, but I pretty much, after a phone screen that I usually conduct, you'll have a good amount of information. If you took good notes and you were really paying attention, you can refer back to them. I tend to actually give people a lot of things, and it's definitely a clue for me as a recruiter to hear if they can take the things I said and leverage them for their interviews. A lot of people talk about interviews being a process of mirroring, right? You take something they're saying and you essentially shine it back to them with your thoughts on it, right? So if we say, yeah, we're really struggling with taking machine learning and applying it to our search functionality, we want to personalize people's search results, but it's just been really hard for us. You got to take that back and say, oh yeah, at my data boot camp, we worked on a problem similar to that. It had to do with personalization, and I think I could totally bring that to that problem, right? So you're talking about the same problem, you're just talking about how you see your experience affecting it. And it takes, you have to be attentive, right? You can't miss those little tidbits because they might be small, they might be big. I might put it right in your face, or I might just drop it and it might seem like a really small thing. But that's kind of the process of interviewing. And we even notice it. When we're talking about candidates, we say, like, he said this thing that made it seem like he knows exactly what we're doing here. And people are like, how did he do that? And someone's like, oh, I said something about that to him. But we're impressed that, right? He took one interview and one interviewer's piece of information and immediately applied it to his thought process or her thought process about what she could do here or what he could do here. And so that's a really important thing. I could go on and on about these types of interview tactics, but you gotta be thoughtful about it at the end of the day.
It's incredible. When you said mirroring, I almost I was just picturing like hand gestures, just copying hand. But
It's similar. It's mentally
yeah,
similar.
mentally, yeah. That was great, guys. I think that was really good advice. You should pick up on that. Go ahead.
I have a question. To be for all three of you guys, but now with the advent of boot camps, all that stuff, and obviously education is a very important thing. What's your guys' opinions about needing to go to institution of higher learning to either get a master's or a PhD in whatever technology you want to go into, right? Whether that's engineering or data science. What's your opinion on that? And maybe Jake, since you're as well, like, is that something that you look for in a startup environment or a big company, or is that something that you might like not take that big of a deal, right? And put that to the side, maybe if they really, really impress you. So yeah, your thoughts.
Well, I got a couple of thoughts. One is, as a candidate, if you're really interested in getting a master's or a PhD in a particular area because you just geek out on it, by all means, I think that's great. There are some businesses, I think, where masters and PhDs, make sense because the problems are truly rocket science, right? In my experience, a lot of times businesses think they have rocket science problems and they don't, okay? And so they'll want a PhD, okay, but they don't really need it, okay, or a master's. And the challenge I found is if you take somebody like that, so I've had in my career 3 PhDs work for me. I've never worked at a rocket science, a company that needed rocket science problem solved. They were good, run-of-the-mill, build a good product, sell it, scale, all good stuff. But what I found was if you bring that PhD in, what you have is somebody who's highly conceptual, but not very practical. And most of the businesses I've been involved in the Bay Area, when you're scaling and executing, you need practical people solving the next problem the next day. And so for me, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. You've got to really fit first of all, if that's what you want to do, you got, that's a real commitment, and it's great if you're going to be the next rocket scientist. On the hiring within the organization, you've got to make sure you've got a problem that fits that skill set very specifically. Otherwise, you have this challenge of most of what we do, in my experience anyway, is very practical, and you don't need necessarily 6 years of training to get there. Back at the beginning of my career, there weren't engineering degrees to be had, so you hired people who were go-getters, who could learn to program, who could pair program, and who built their skills over time to be engineers. One of the first people I hired came from the customer service department without any former training in engineering. And today he's the VP of engineering at a company. And again, had no former background. Another guy, the chief engineer at ExactTarget, which really went through a lot of scale. We're not 35 billion, but we were sending 1 billion emails. This is 10 years ago. So 1 billion was a big number 10 years ago. It's not a big number today, 12 years ago. And our lead engineer for the mail platform had a high school degree and was self-taught. So those two examples for me tell me that you can start with something as short as a boot camp, as long as you're committed to continuing to learn and build your career into anything you want it to be.
It's incredible. So I guess, end of the day, it's passion, right? If you're passionate, you love it, and you continue to do it,
Continuous learning.
it's your hobby, and it's for you.
You wanna go?
Well, one thing to what the other saying here, I would say is do not try to retro. Do not go back and try to match a position, whatever the position asks. See what you are good at, and then try to apply that. So if you are good at computer science, you want to pursue master's, PhD, it's up to you again. But not everybody is looking at your degree per se. It's all about what kind of passion you want to bring in and how much effort you can put in and get things done. I think that's what everybody is looking at. So how many of you have watched Pursuit of Happiness? Right? So the person didn't know anything, right? And at the end of the day, he got everything done. Like, yeah, right? So I think it's all about doing what you love and making sure it's not like somebody is saying, okay, or maybe I've seen like a lot of people, they would just try to do a degree. Oh, that guy's doing my neighbor's doing. Okay, let me do that because I see a lot of companies that are asking for it. But at least now the trend has changed. It's not about just a master's or a bachelor. There will be some companies that will definitely put that on the hiring positions. But again, the amount of problem-solving skills that you're bringing in is very important. And I think one point to what I didn't know earlier was to be crazy. I think I look for a lot of people crazy in the sense that you got to bring in something new, not what I'm asking you to do. So Steve Jobs used to say, like, I do not want to hire smart people and tell them what to do. I want to hire them so that they can tell me what will be the next iPhone looks like. So I think that's the mantra for you guys.
That's awesome.
So to go back to your question about boot camps and all that, it's a complex answer. I will say, at least from our perspective, to a few of the smaller companies I've worked for, it's tricky. I think a lot of bigger companies can do it easier. I have friends that recruit for bigger companies like Eventbrite and Twitter and all that, and I think they have an easier time hiring out of boot camps. The reason being, for us, training is committing a resource. We only have 50 resources, right? So you have less training opportunities. So there is this thing where we look for people who could be fairly autonomous, right? And that's me being, point blank honest about that kind of the trickiness of it and where we usually see boot camp people fall short. With that said, there are people, we've hired a few people out of boot camps, and usually there's usually two reasons I think people go to boot camps. So raise your hand if you are part of this boot camp because you're trying to pivot your career. You're trying to move into this new field. Okay, and how many of you is it just like a next step in your career? It's advancing what you're doing. So yeah, those are usually the two tracks that I see, right? It's people that are trying to move into a new area completely, or people that are trying to add on to it. And it's the same for most boot camps, I think, right? No matter what they are focused on. So there's, I think that the bigger thing boils down to making sure that whatever you're looking for actually aligns with your skill set, even as it is coming out of boot camp. I think it's pretty often that we get people, and I think I was talking about this with you right before we started talking, was talk to someone who just came out of a boot camp, and I'm like, yeah, so what do you want to do? And they're like, deep learning. And I'm like, you just came out of a boot camp, you want to do deep learning? Like, that's great. Like, we're a tiny company. We can't have some person who's just barely done this doing our deep learning. It's a big problem, right? And you can work your way there. But for us, like, I mean, it sometimes speaks to not paying attention to what the hints that I was giving. Again, it's kind of going back to that. Before we really get into some of these deep learning problems, I mean, we have some neural nets. We're using a little bit of deep learning, right? But we need to sanitize our data. We need cleaner automation in our data pipeline. There's all sorts of things that are just we're not ready for it. We're not there. And then I have someone who says that to me, and it's kind of like well, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't help us. And also, even if it would, how ready are you to really be that person in a small company? And so I would say, generally when I see the best fit with people, it's because you have some type of degree or you've taken on some type of projects that have really solidified your knowledge base. And so, I mean, the guy we just hired out of Insight had a PhD and went to Insight, and he brought it all together in this really awesome way where his project was super relevant to what we were doing, and again, he pinpointed all these problems that we had. So if you are coming out, like for instance, and startups are a great place to go when you're coming out of here because, and in my opinion, the reason why is because you'll be able, maybe you won't start where you want, but you will very easily be able to move into it. That's the nice thing about startups. You get a lot of fluidity in roles. So I often have pitched people, like, hey, come in as one of our advanced data analysts, right? And then move into those machine learning problems. Start applying machine learning to those problems, and then get into the things that you're passionate about. So there's kind of this just make sure you're not getting ahead of yourself, right? I think there's some self-reflection that's required. We also, often have people that are kind of falling short in terms of the math requirements that are required for some of our algorithms and things like that. Even with the people we have, which is part of the reason we're looking for people that are like math gurus, if you will. We know that that's a weakness of ours, and we can use people that excel there. So I don't know, did you study math before, and then you went here, and did that really build out what you needed in order to accomplish that? Those are the types of questions that we tend to look at, right? So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a complicated answer, but we do look for it. It just tends to be how you complemented that boot camp with a degree or with a passion project. So yeah.
What I really liked about what you said was the project part, right? So that candidate that you brought in, this project really spoke to your challenges. So you guys, for your final projects, right? Maybe you could look at companies that would benefit from the insights that you gained from your final project, right? So maybe that's a way for you to like look at your job search a little bit differently from what you've done for your final project, and sourcing those specific companies that way. And then you were talking about math requirements. Maybe you could paint a picture for them of what that would be, just for your company.
I don't even know. I'm terrible at math. I just know that when I talk to our CTO, he's just like, oh man, I need to double check all of our algorithms, and these predictive models we had, they sometimes are out of whack because something's slightly off. So I think when you're getting to putting things into production, it has to be very precise. And so there is a level of precision that's required that, like I said, I can't even speak to it because I don't even understand the complexities behind it. I'm sure maybe one of you can. I don't have an engineering degree, but it's these problems become very sophisticated very fast, especially when they need to be put into production. And one slight number change can totally throw off an algorithm, right? So it's I don't know how you get to that point necessarily. I know that we tend to consider people who have more advanced math degrees or science degrees that got them that math, that understanding of math. But we've also talked to people who have taken it upon themselves to just read up on them, right? There's so many free resources, certification programs online and things like that, where I think you can piece it together. But you have to have kind of a laser-like focus in figuring out what you need and what companies are looking for. So yeah, I think that's also another reason to always ask for feedback from companies when if you don't necessarily get the job, or even, actually, I think I generally encourage people to even ask for feedback when you're unsure, right? Like if you're like in between. I think too often people just ask when they don't get a job, and then you're kind of like, well, if you're in a process and they're on the fence or they just haven't gotten back to you, and maybe you will proceed. If you get feedback before the next round, that's better for you than if you got rejected, right? So I think, just saying, hey, I always open to feedback. Any thoughts on, anything I should focus on before I come in next, or for next steps, or for my next interview, or whatever you want to say.
That's great advice. I know a candidate that didn't graduate college. He went to UT Austin for a little bit. Smart guy, and he just spent like a year on Coursera, just learning algorithms, linear algebra, differential equations.
Yeah.
Kind of incredible that he self-taught himself all of that. I barely learned it in college with the professor, so he learned it all by himself. So I think you can do a lot if you're passionate. I think the math too, all of you can learn. I think this class was much harder than the math that I took in college. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. The next question was culture, and about how you guys really like build a culture at your company. Like, what's one thing that you guys do to like build a culture that your company wants and kind of uses to keep candidates around and keep employees like positive?
I think the one thing that I've really seen from a management perspective is so it's an anti-pattern that occurs in management of teams is over-reliance on the hero. He or she who can solve a problem. You're working long hours, everybody's tired, and you always go to the hero to solve the problem. And what that does is it kind of puts one person up on a pedestal. It devalues or de-emphasizes some of the other members of the group. And it builds a feedback loop where the hero's learning more and learning faster and understanding more. And so you go back to the hero to solve the problem the next time, right? And you don't want to optimize a team that way. You want to optimize a team for the culture, which means everybody feels worthwhile. Everybody feels validated in the work that they do and needed and part of the team. And I kind of do the reverse. If somebody solved a problem for me, I say thank you, and the next time I've got a problem, I try and pick somebody else from the group. And the way I think about it, and I just built a car, and in an engine, you have, in this particular one, you have 8 cylinders. I don't want one really good cylinder and 7 okay cylinders. I want 8 great cylinders. And so with the team, what I try and do is make sure that everybody feels like they're contributing in a significant way. I don't over-rely, which is easy to do because they're the same gender as me, or they have the same background as I do, or whatever, or we get along, or whatever it is. You try and get everybody feeling like they're stars, if you will, and contributing significantly. And that when you do that, the members of the team start doing it for each other. Meaning, if you mirror and reflect the value you see in everybody on the team, the members of the team will mirror and reflect the value that they see in each other. And that helps create a really a team where everybody looks to everybody else and respects the value that they bring.
Wow. So, sounds like you're a great boss. How would you determine that, though?
I am a great boss.
I told them horror stories of my past. I would go on a job and they would just lie to me. Like, they would just outright lie to me about about like their engineers. I remember my boss was sitting right in front of me, did not mention that he wasn't even a citizen, didn't even mention that he was actually a resident of France, like lives in France. He was just there that day to interview me. So on my first day at work, I was the only engineer there, and my boss was in France part-time. I learned my lesson to ask a lot of questions, but like how would they determine like that you know the manager, like what questions can they ask a manager on when they're interviewing without actually saying like what do you do to do these things, like what can they say to kind of determine that you breed this kind of culture where everyone's involved and everyone's valued.
Well, you may have better insight here. My short answer is there's a lot of team interviewing going on now where you're meeting most of the members of even if it's a larger organization, they're a small team focused on a single problem. They all want to meet the candidate, and you have the opportunity to ask people on the team anything you can to understand, how validated and useful they feel as a team member. You can ask them straight out, what do you think of your boss? Some people say, oh, they're great. Some people say, he's pretty good, buddy, whatever. So I think the team interview approach that a lot of companies are using give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So you may have perspective.
Yeah, it's it's a good question. I think it's I sort of like you should give them a taste of their own medicine and ask certain questions that would pull it out. So I train our interviewers on behavioral interviewing. The idea about that is that we try to pull experiences people have had out of them that reflect on values that we're trying to assess. So the idea is your history predicts your future, right? For the most part. If you are a mean person when you're stressed, you're probably going to be a mean person when you're stressed in your next job and the one after that, etc. So we have certain questions that try to pull those historical examples out of you. So I'd almost say the answer is in doing the opposite back to the company, right? What do you guys do when production is like shut down and everything's aflame, right? What do? They're probably going to talk about how they deal with it and who they go to, who the all-stars might be, or who those people are. You could even just straight up ask them, who are your top performers and what are their roles in the company, right? I think those are the types of things that can be helpful. So, think about, I could maybe flesh out a few of them for you, but that's probably a good example to start with, right? Is when things are going awry, who do you go to? Or how do you guys deal with it as a team? If they say, we always go to this one person, there might be bad distribution of how they're dealing with problems. If they can say like, well, it depends on what the problem is. If it's this type of problem, we go to Brian. If we go to this type of problem, we go to Lisa. Then they're like, okay, there's some distribution here. So I'd probably try to tackle it from that side. It's a really good question, though. I'm not, haven't seen a lot of interviewers take that approach into trying to dig into that type of thing. But yeah, that would be, if I were to ask a way that like wouldn't be offensive, but would be, you get good data points out of them, that'd probably be how.
That's awesome. Thank you guys. I think that's helped them a lot.
Yeah, so I would just say the favorite question I ask all the interviewers, what's the last challenging problem that you solved here at your company? And then you will say, oh, well, I spent 2 months, 1 month. So you're turning the table around and you will know how much time the person has spent, right? Because you will say, if the person is new, they will say, well, I've been here for 1 month. And if the person is like, has been a veteran of the company or whatever, right? They will say, oh, well, at my 10 years of tenure at Yahoo, I have done this. So I think that's how you can ask the person, what's the challenge that you have solved? Then you will know how technical your manager is. And that's how I chose out of all my offers that my manager is one of the most technical that I have worked with in big data, because the other persons, with due respect to everybody, they're like, can we get this done? But here my manager would say, I would say, okay, I want 10 nodes. Then he will say, can you give me a breakdown? And I like that. He's challenging me and I like that. So even I challenge my guys so the other thing that I like is, essentially I want to empower my team, given to the question that you were asking earlier. So empowering the team helps develop superstars across the team, not just one person. So let's say I have been with big data for like almost 10 years now. I know a lot about it, but there are still new stuff comes every day, right? So I want people to start digging. I can give them advice. Okay, let's start digging, but I don't want to do every single A through Z for them because otherwise they're not learning, right? I give them certain things, let's review and provide them the feedback. So that's how you kind of empower people, and review is super important. So if somebody is not reviewing the stuff with them, then you know that, okay, maybe you may not up to the mark, so you might want to provide feedback.
I guess this is a question for everybody. When you're building a team, like, I guess like what type of mix are you looking for in terms of like senior level engineers and junior level engineers?
Great question.
Sure. Is that like a ratio question?
No.
No.
I mean, it's a different answer for everybody.
It depends on the team, unfortunately. But I think generally the way we have it set up, we're a small company, so I'm sure you guys have some different proportions of us. But we usually will have a team lead and then 2 or 3 people. And once it gets bigger than that, then it kind of rolls up into a larger organization. So we have some kind of smaller teams that are operating at about 4 people. And like, for instance, our data team is about to hit 6 people. It was just 4 people. Once it does, our CTO is about to move over into the data side a little bit more and slide off of the platform side because the platform team has some kind of stronger leaders, I guess. So he's filling in there because there's a lot more going on the data side. But yeah, I mean, sorry, I just made a bunch of noise by tapping that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. And then in terms of dynamics, it's kind of hard to speak to that. You're always trying to fill in your gaps. But yeah, I tend to think that most good leaders or leads or managers, so if they've been around for a while, can really train about 3 or 4 people who are junior at a time. And that's probably, that's what I've seen from my experience. Maybe there's superb managers that can be better than that. But then I think usually if it gets higher than that, they count on some intermediate level people to help with augment some of the training.
So I think this is a tricky question because it depends on, again, dynamics of the team. But in terms of big data or big data platform, essentially, we look for people who have at least worked in or solved some kind of a big data problem, right? At least 1 year, whether it's a school project. So right now we are doing a project with one of the universities in the US, where we are working with a professor and a student for, I think it will be a 2-year project, where we could ultimately hire that person as well. So during the time, we will be able to evaluate even, and there will be funding for the university, right? So that's one of the approaches. The other is essentially 1 year at least everybody looks for, so that you have solved those kind of challenges. Or, I mean, during the interview, you will be able to see, because I've seen people like at Yahoo, because everybody, when the company is so popular, everybody wants to interview for Yahoo, right? And people come in and then they will say, oh, I have been with big data for 10 years. Okay, let's talk about something interesting then. If you have been with big data for 10 years, then you ask those questions, right? But if somebody were to say that I'm starting, I think be humble. That's the key question, key aspect here. Even if you are 10 years, you should always mark yourself saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably rate 7, 8. If the person is too pushy, the interview is too pushy, you can say let's talk, and then you will be able to see. Or, but again, I think at least 1 year, everybody would expect you at least in the big data.
The teams I've worked with are reasonably small, like, the largest engineering team is probably 100. But most of the teams in the kind of the growing companies, anywhere from 5 to 30 or 40, and in that case, if we've got a decently well architected system that's following some reasonable patterns, you can have more junior folks come in and work kind of side by side and get them started with a more senior engineer. Yeah, it's a hard question. I've worked on some platforms that were kind of monolithic hairballs, just kind of really complex. It's really hard to get a junior person that can introspect complex code and figure out how to get productive. So it depends a little bit on the platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. It depends on like the problems that need to be solved. If there are problems that are junior level, then by all means, like we hired like 4 junior engineers when I was in VP Math. And then as soon as the problem got a lot more complex, then we brought in more senior level talent. But you don't want senior level talent to be bored with junior level problems. Whereas a junior level candidate would be very excited and passionate to work on those kind of problems and do a good job as well. So I want to get the networking started. Is that okay with you guys? Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to just have each of you in different parts of the room. So Jake, I'd love for you to be with this group first. And then you guys can choose, you can be right here, and then maybe you can go to the back.
Sure.
Yeah, excellent. So you guys, I want you to be back. And you guys can stay.
Don't want to not.
Yep.
How's it going? John.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Dennis. Sorry. Oh, the guy bumped something.
So fun. I just stopped the recording.
Yeah, I think that's good now. Yeah.
To David's point is about startups.
Do a stand up.
Probably don't need the rest of us. Should I tell the
Yeah,
front
we should
Yeah. Yeah.
So to help the juniors.
Yeah.
Do anything.
We're currently developing that, so we hadn't had an internship.
Thank you.
Well, we
I really appreciate
had
that.
lived in, and it was very selective. And then, like last year, we didn't the year before, so I'm working on building that program. I think we're going to have more internships next year, which is a lot more than zero. And for me, it feels significant. And we will have one on the downside after, so that's going to be a new one for us. We're at the point where we can put a little bit more work into training. The tricky part with us is we're looking any internal we're looking for is going to be with the goal of having this convert to a full-time employee. Which I guess is not a bad thing, right?
Yeah,
It's it's ideal for most people.
You never know what
The only problem is like we look for that upfront.
It started all about
Upfront, which means that the interview process is so rigorous, and also that from great plan to have some conversion.
I sent one.
But that's a fairly
On top of that question,
try to be.
So a lot of the internships that I've done on LinkedIn, they say sole student.
Yeah.
Does that necessarily apply like maybe to other companies too outside of the area? Like students, or should we just apply anyway?
I could apply it. You know, I think
I'm not talking about
people
that.
get very
was taking
for students because it's the easiest people to assume are looking for. People aren't, and
There,
yeah, they're like students, and it's not as easy to assume that. So I know that for us, we started with students, but we slowly started seeing that, like, hey, there's some people out there that are interested in this, who almost are more qualified to give us more hours and things like that. So I'd say you have really
hard to solve the
putting yourself out there.
So as a recruiter,
See if you can apply it tomorrow, but at the end, try to also.
what are some things which you look in a candidate as per something like, you know, this impresses you or like, wow, you know, he can be or she can be a good candidate and you can just move forward with the application.
Yeah. In some ways, I can give you my thoughts. I think I can also give you the kind of opposite of that. Like, what are the things that you can mess up usually? Maybe I'll start with that because I think, for instance, a lot. Like every week, I have conversations with people who I'm excited about, or I think have potential, but they clearly didn't really like the job description, and so they're not. Like, you're looking at the job description, you shouldn't be like reading it, but you should know the things you should highlight. Like if I look at your LinkedIn or your resume, and I see things that say that as keywords, right? I'm pretty much a keyword person.
No problem.
I'm looking for keywords. I will know low, very high low, deep technical things, right? I know the high level terms that I'm using, and the kind of thought patterns matter. But if you're not giving me the data on top, and you're like, it becomes clear to me that you're getting so that's one thing I think. You also have to spend time with the product. You know, when I talk to a kid and I say, yeah, we can get keyboard, and then they're like, it's keyboard? And they're like, and I'm like, do you even know who we are? Like, that's bad. Definitely don't do it. You gotta know what we are. And then in terms of things you can do, I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Somebody else will say, talk about how
Not today, I could do it tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you again for sharing.
What frameworks and what's a project you use that you believe that you're passionate about.
They didn't honor
And even if they're not
like
asking
it
for
that way.
questions, I just kind of talking about behavioral literacy. Find a way to
Never
talk about experiences you had
No worries.
that
very
are relevant to what they're looking for. Even if they're not asking, you don't, if the question doesn't seem right, you can answer and then say, I also want to just tell you, like, you know, I looked at your website and I thought this was really interesting. I had this project I worked on that where I did X, Y, and Z. It's really relevant. Just find a way to plug it in.
wasn't Bay Area.
They're not giving you
Left everything. He was like,
all.
Bay Area is crazy.
So that's a
like,
big thing. You have to say,
so he
Other
went
than
and
that,
bought
you know,
houses, I think, in outside of New York.
yeah, have done your research, show some passion for something, talk about something that's relevant.
Some horse and he bought. He sold his house
And
and
other than that,
big house, 5 horses, something like that.
the rest are
He
kind of
was quoting for
small things. You know, like for us, we're very much
But he
like
said,
we're a small team, so we're very much reliant on people. So we get a lot of people who are comfortable
one day, it
working
will be 1 month
an atmosphere where, like, if there's an issue at 9 p.m., that you're okay with that. And that's kind of the
So
intentional
he
thing.
was interviewing at Yahoo.
It's hard to I won't ask questions that are like you know, can't take dealing with issues that come up, but I can feel that people are okay with that, right? They're like, you know, I like to go home for coffee, daddy, work, and then kind of like, well, do you know what type of company we are? We're a small company. There's an issue, it needs to be solved.
Then I
We have
started with
300 million users who are using us, and we can't have 12 hours of outage for, you know, some issue. So you also do it first. try to understand if you go for a smaller company, they'll be probably.
Is
And
we
if you go to a
have
bigger company, maybe not. I can't speak for
and
the company
they have
bigger than
those things like I'm not
So I'm always scared of going
They
for
have
startups
giant
because I always look for geniuses.
pace.
I'm like, am I that much capable?
So they had
So-
building tractors.
So I think a lot of people they experience like I'm not good enough. She does.
Especially for startups, not for the big companies.
And she's like,
It's
I mean,
always
like you're
every
she's
person
like,
is
she joined
like our sales guy.
Autodesk.
Oh, yeah, that's a great lesson.
Yeah, she's really impressive. So like, stop.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. Startups are very good at
Regular Java program.
they have like so many criteria and it overflows. Like even I can't keep track of it. Like sometimes I feel like
So
we're
we came out, so I wrote a program.
and there's a lot of we have each of our interviews focused on different portions of what you need to do. So how often do people solve like but no, you don't
So you
need
guys
to have the right combination. You have to match it well with the job. You need a
database
lot
work,
more
you know the document
and
and so on.
that's actually I like thinking about that. It is true, but
If you
it depends
search
on
one
you should
word,
find out if
you
there's
will go
good
every single cell.
That's like for me,
But
I'm looking for a
so
data
what
scientist,
they do
data
is
analyst.
they put in the words,
But if you can take
with
two
the
of
word they
those,
will say which
I
document is on
interact
which
and
page.
you're like, I might be a little weak here, or I'm
You'll
strong
say,
here.
give me
You would be a great
Banana.
startup person. Where you're gonna like solve the
So like you search at Amazon, right? If you are
Exactly.
and this is what happens. So they index the word.
So
It's called an
in different
word
aspects,
index.
there's so many languages.
So
and
we
everything
use that.
Yeah.
Index.
Then you have a subset that you
And guiding search in milliseconds.
some of the content they have, some of them, but maybe in addition to that, just some. They have other languages.
Yeah, what field are you? Let me ask you first. What field are you guys in right now?
It's not a process. So they would bring some ideas for technology. So how would you rate that? How do you rate the technology experience that they bring to you that matches yours against their out-of-the-box kind of?
We actually go pretty even. This has been a really big discussion for like our team searches. Having people that are really familiar with the library and know which libraries we should be using versus people who could create Sure.
It was
What are those?
the roast turkey. Bacon.
Maybe. So we definitely think that people who come in outside of the ways that we're doing things can be really valuable. We actually know that for a fact. Our one of our scientists creating his own solutions, and that sometimes there can be solutions to the problems we're trying to address, but so you'll learn about a lot of techniques. Every step kind of becomes customized as something to get big enough.
Yeah.
And you start, you meet people who know how to come up with those creative solutions. So it's definitely, it goes both ways. I mean, I think you have to, if anything, you have to show what, there's always a big conversation about, you can't be too religious about what libraries and languages you're using. I think usually for us, that's a red flag. It's like, you think Python's the best in the world, and it's, I mean, we use Python, like, you can't, but like, nothing else is better. And we're like, well, what if we want to start using more Java or R, right? We don't want to have someone who's like, no R, no Java. We want Python, like, we don't want teachers making the decision based on that belief that they constructed. We want what's best. And then, yeah, I mean, generally just showing a willingness to learn that you can be like, yeah, I mean, I think it's always good to cite examples of how quickly you can pick up as well, right? Because if you're coming in and we do need you to understand a library, maybe you have to twist it. Talk about a related thing that you picked up in a short amount of time and how you used it. And then we can have some confidence that, hey, you should come in, you can pick it up in a short amount of time, they're not a 7-person group, means that you only can use this one library.
So you should take more classes from some of the professors.
Question.
Well, I probably do have questions.
I have so many.
But it's like mostly like your personal opinion.
That's
So, for example, like the company in my mind,
Yes.
and there's a position that I also really like. Like, let's say they come on site, but they have a lot of experience in like
In DevOps.
yeah, for example, right? And so what would be like the best kind of approach? Try to take my time, build some skills in like data analysis, right? And like try to target that position, or get in as a DevOps engineer and try to probably migrate over to data analyst at the time. Like it's probably like it's not like a general advice, but it's just a personal opinion. Like what you do.
I think DevOps to data would be hard.
Okay.
My personal understanding. I think DevOps people tend to get stuck in a lot of back end, like your platform back end DevOps. Moving to data, like I've
Let me go.
tried to do DevOps to data science. I mean, they didn't make it very hard. So I don't know why. I could take that into it. But I just mentally data lead seems a lot further. It'd be a lot easier to be a data analyst and then start working on more advanced analysis problems. You start using some predictive models, things like that. And then I think you'd have a lot easier to find and did you say you were thinking of starting
Some
a project?
would want to.
I didn't say that, but my question was about if there's a company that I would like to work
Yeah, got it.
oh yeah, like, but so basically like the ways is like probably like try to build skills on my own, like probably like directly apply for
Samsung, they're
data analyst.
it's pretty great phones, great cheap, no pay, all that.
Do you think you could get a DevOps on that?
Well, yeah, I mean like it's
So
eventually
largely,
probably at this moment it would be probably easier
for some stuff,
to get that. To get the DevOps role.
I mean, I have to look at your resume to give you my best advice, but I think that
altogether we have 40 in our beginning.
like you're in this camp right now. This is a great opportunity, like I said, for you to pivot your career. It's what a lot of people leverage for. As soon as you go into DevOps, you're gonna have to find a way to jump over it. And you'd have to be lucky if a company is willing to do that internally. So I think right now, I'd say your situation best. If data science or advanced data analytics is what you want to do with data visualization, now's a good time to start planting that seed. And don't go on a different path and try that. That'd be my personal.
Yep.
I lost track after listening to your question.
You're at Autodesk?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm working there as a senior analyst. I'm trying to move towards the next step. Doing modeling, like entering, not a data scientist, but junior data scientist, if they have it.
Or a data scientist working on machine learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're learning all those skills right now. So I want to definitely learn more about it.
Right.
At the same time, leverage whatever the skills I have already, like SQL, Hadoop, I just do that in a Python and machine learning, that is something I need some projects to work on that. So I'm looking at that kind of a profile, but it's very difficult to find a market right now. Some people will be like, data analyst, okay, stick with SQL. Data scientist, you have to go to the machine learning. Like, I need a mid level somewhere. So that's the struggle I'm going through.
I think a good, like our company would maybe go for two. So I think small companies could do it. They have, like I was saying earlier, we can't even do all the machine learning stuff we want because we need someone to generate the reports to help us with the data. So if you're willing to do, like, it's kind of, I look at it as we have tasks that are probably much lower level in terms of the skills they require, and also a lot higher. So you're gonna have a bigger range, whereas at a bigger company you're gonna do this, right? So for us, you might do some things and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm doing this still. But then the next week you're gonna be working on some really advanced problems. So it's a little, you have to, it's gonna come, the good is gonna come with that. And that's maybe the tricky part of a lot of startups. When people switch from degrees to smaller mentality for that, it's a lot harder. We can't hire people who are unwilling to do so.
Yeah, it's very interesting question. So I think
But sometimes they don't listen to the reject people. They come and we're like, wow, this person loves machine learning, and they do like, actually we interviewed him. He left, his name was Trevor, and he was interviewing with us, and he only wanted to do machine learning and deep learning. And we were like, we're not ready for you. That's what you want to do. We're not ready because we need someone that can do all that. And he was fantastic. He was amazing. But we were like, we're gonna have trouble giving you enough work because there's so many issues down here, right?
So that's probably actually a bigger company. So even if you go for data analytics, you're just stuck there. In that range, you just keep making reports again and again and again. And after 3 months, you will get bored. Like, I'm not learning the next step. I can get to the next job or something. And you have to learn on your own. That's the problem.
How you find
the maximum of cash
for a stock. Every single stock. And it could be every hour that you can consider our ranking.
You were learning a lot of those
So understand those basics.
and at the cost of and look on the other side so sort of financial analysts and analysts. A lot of the jobs there.
So 2 are cold and 1 room temperature.
Awesome, thank you so much.
You don't really have to form programs already. Python, do you have an insight on why the is it because the field is still sort of new, sort of fresh? A lot of companies, it's just a buzzword to them. Maybe they just want to have that.
Are you looking at, I'm starting to feel hard.
I think there's a good mix of both big and small. I know right now they have a full position of data analysts.
Right. It sounds a bit old school. It's hard for me on campus. Even our data analysts want to know and because they see way more they have to know SQL way better than they know Python. But we would want them to be able to know it.
Each machine is 4 gigs.
Out of the places you just named, I feel like, so my favorite job was before startups and stage. I don't know if you're on that. AngelList, if you're looking for more startup roles, first of all, they have a great job search functionality, and then they also are, like, for startups, they're really favorable. It's a great job board. And they also have, like, they've done a good job making a good environment for startups. Investors are on there, so they invest in startups. Also, employees on there, companies, which is great. It's a very, I hate using the word synergy, but it's very synergistic. It's like, it's all working together. And a lot of people are on it in the Bay Area when they're young. Because so check that out.
It's going to solve itself.
Some learning. I've checked that out. And 2 people I contacted and they contacted. And then with the startup, the sponsorship issue will come up in between.
Visa sponsorship.
Yeah, like we don't sponsor like okay, that should be my first question right now. Do you sponsor then I receive question?
Yeah, we went through a phase where we did a sponsorship. I did like have a little and it's worth asking me we were like we were like not even thinking about it. We would have had to hire someone that hire support it, but now we do. So there is a I would say that your search for startups would be companies that have had a really big Series A or Series C. I think that's kind of the thing to know. They haven't really said a lot. Be a little more concerned about it, right? Because the law firms around here are pretty much charged.
You want to like showcase how you will use your current experience.
So in your company, what is like interview process?
Not working program.
How many steps you have? How many technical roles?
Yeah, so our process is you talk to me or
I understand. Yes, I'm not.
there's a data challenge. You ask about, you That's how we're done. But it probably, in truth, it takes somewhere between 3 and 5 hours, 6 hours, and you can spread it out. And then we talk to our CTO, and that's a phone call, which will be able to talk technical experience. And then we do an on-site interview. And of course,
that's what he said.
That will have 3 technical interviews.
He said, I may not know the answer to a question, but I will get
It's a lot.
That's what go getter.
Going off of what you said just now, feel free to like say, oh, this is something see there, or like, for the questions that you asked and the technical questions that you asked, yeah, look at
So,
anecdotal
yes,
examples.
That I asked,
Yeah.
and then I screen.
Yeah, like maybe not with your company personally, past experience, you know,
I have
data scraping thing that I want you to test out. It's just like that you can like.
In order to just use it one stop.
I'm not sure what you mean. So you mean in my phone call?
Yeah, so like you said you give questions out to the candidates.
Yeah,
for
the data challenge.
Yeah, the challenge. That's
Got it. So the data challenge is a huge data set. We like take a few things out of it so that you can't like figure out who the users are or whatever. But it's essentially anonymized data that is actually from our system, and we just tell you to do an analysis on it. The goal is to see essentially if you can take data, manipulate it, and then figure something out. And some people have used very advanced models on it. I think it's been somewhat helpful for them. But at the end of the day, I think it's what it ends up showing for us is product oriented. So we want to see if you can take the data and try to distill something about it, how users are behaving, and then make a recommendation on that. And that's not just data work, right? That takes kind of a level of thinking where you're going to step back and say, what is this trend mean? What gap is there? Maybe it's even a recommendation that we need this type of data because people think the image of what's going on. I know that for us, that's a really big thing right now. Where we have all these metrics that we know by, but I think right now we're trying to navigate. We need to figure out like how do we get to that. So there's really big questions related to that as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if our CTO reviews it. I don't. So I don't know what he would say is like, oh, that's the best type of thing. But I know the problems that we have in our company, what the gaps are. So if you can show that at least you have instincts to distill that type of information, that's what they're
overall.
So rather than giving them a question, just a question like, why is the form sound or why are people that? You let them figure it out on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is pretty much how it really would be if you were working for us, right? Yeah. I think that's the goal. It's like, okay, here's a ton of data. So what are our strengths? Like, what do we need? What do we need to figure out? It can be overwhelming, I'm sure, because there's a lot. But we need people who can overcome that and create such a thesis around or hypothesis around what we do. Because I have to potential trend that's worth exploring. A lot of you guys know, like a lot of this is testing, right? You come up with a theory, you test it, and find a good way to test it. The A/B testing is the name of the game right now. So, yeah, help design with that testing.
What's the lifestyle of the
So I think that's what you bring in the background.
We have some good flexibility in terms of shooting we don't have a regular works from home policy, although we're right now building that. But it's like benefits for companies. So with that we review all of our benefits. It is mostly an office culture because we're small enough where we want people to belong. But we're kind of a dispersed region. So we have New York office for mostly our sales people. Definitely office for our content partnership office. But our San Francisco office is definitely the hub. It has a lot of people coming into it. A lot of collaborations, a lot of meetings. We're trying to get better at finding digital meetings so that might be more accommodating, but I think right now we're still very focused in the office. Yeah, we're under 50. We're just under 50 people. Well, shoot above 50, all right? That's okay. So yeah, we're just about to pass 50 people. Gonna hire a lot of people in the next 2 months. So we'll see. I think I already am feeling some shifts in terms of the culture and the kind of expanded meetings. I think the average age last year was 30 meetings, and now we're up to 39. So there was a really big leap in terms of that as well. Family, living further away. So there's some shifting needs in the company, but we haven't necessarily addressed them. And it kind of takes people with big ownership from the management standpoint to make decisions about culture and things like that.
It's good to know some people so that you can get the information from them because
yeah.
How do you feel about this far? It sounds like you should, before you start, after you find maybe even before find something
unless there is
asking some questions to answer the company. Is that like recommended, or do you find that annoying? I don't necessarily
To ask questions.
Yes, ask questions before you process.
No, I definitely don't. If the questions are thoughtful, definitely it's always a good thing.
What kind of questions do you
Questions about culture, questions about our policies, which tend to reflect like someone's care about a certain topic. I sometimes get a lot of, I generally get a lot of questions about team size, and then like what their role would be there. But I would say, if you're emailing or messaging someone or you're not connected to a company, phone calls are a little easier. I mean, you can write some, but like, I'll get if I see one where I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to write out 2 pages. So that's really the bigger issue.
You're sending thousands of
so yeah, that's I'd say that's it's always good to propose maybe an informational phone call if you want to be kind of non-committal about are you putting in throwing your hat in for an application and you want to learn more because information phone calls are a lot easier. I can speak to something that would normally take me, like if you ask me some really hard questions, it could take me 15 minutes to type it up, but I can tell you in 2 minutes. So it's sometimes easier.
Well, that's what people are moving away from things that will tie you down to open source work and fast.
We never met. This was I believe who Steve. It was just someone else on big tier.
There's just a really good question as to find out more about meetups and networking places that attend.
Yeah.
At least how to go down.
Yeah. I mean, programs like this have lots of launch events. It's not bad. We do have stuff, but I don't attend as many. You can go to especially like the specialized ones. You have people that are going to the like Elasticsearch meetup. And sometimes they're pitching there. We have people that are trying to find
definitely
sometimes recruit there and things like that. So there are certain ones I'd say the ones that are more successful or more specialized would be the ones that there's a lot of meetups out there that are smaller and I think I'm good for those. But for me, if I'm going to go to one, I have to see that there's these people either really understand a certain topic or that there's a lot of people and maybe they'll get someone that
make sure, like I said, 4 or 5 things you've got for now. You can argue
but also I would say the unicorns leverage your networks always. So like going to events is good, but also meet with people who talk to you. People that are sent to me through friends or people that I don't really prioritize or even acquaintances, it's definitely something that I'll pay attention to. So if you have friends or connections out there, you know they know people. That's definitely a close thing.
Don't have the high valuation.
Do you get more, whatever it is, so say if people that are personally recommended to you on a direct basis, as opposed to someone who you don't know but sends in a resume, applies for a job. Honestly speaking,
I think I have a different
do they get the same consideration? Do you find that you're hiring more?
Well,
Because
there
someone
are
comes to
certain
us and
things,
says, like this guy, why don't we hire
machine
him?
learning and all
How
that kind of
does
stuff.
that work for you and your company?
I definitely go more. I look deeper into the person that was referred to me than the person who just outright applied. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, unless your resume really caught my eye, but if I'm like if you're like, well, if someone's not exactly a fit, or maybe they're not like they're meeting the minimum criteria, but they're not a fit, I would say I'm likely to look at it.
Hey guys, 8-minute warning.
It's one
8-minute warning.
It's one of the unfortunate things about I think you read all these things about recruiters all the time, and I hate this, but I think it's generally true. If I get a resume, I'll spend somewhere between 10 and 20 seconds looking at it, and it's because I get a lot. So, but if I get it from someone else, it's an indicator that someone wants to vouch for you. So there's that comes with a little bit more weight. So then it goes up to 30, 40 seconds, right, or something like that. I mean, it depends who it is, right? I put more weight on some people's opinions. But I get resumes from people referring people to me who I don't even know a good amount, and I still pay attention to it. Because again, you have someone who's so I went under that
start to write SQL first, right?
It's the same with investors. Investors are always looking for signals that the founder has someone back. One of his friends or person. It's much better than someone's random. I think a lot of people do that.
It seems to be pretty
Yeah. Not that it means like, I mean, I respond to people on a weekly basis, cold applying. So it's not like it's impossible. Not to interview, but it gets less.
What PM or project managers do is
Do you monitor LinkedIn at all?
Oh yeah,
Or-
I'm talking things.
they come to me.
It's like my hunting ground.
Okay.
It's kind of, I mean, I spend a lot of time
Work with
there.
engineers.
And
Engineers will deliver.
I
This
have
table is available.
people on my team that I also always look at. I would search terms. There's a button on LinkedIn that you can click that will tell people that you're looking for work. Not a lot of people do that. I think it's a somewhat new feature. It's good. Essentially, if a recruiter's good enough, they can set it up so that it's notified when people are active. So I get notified for people that flip that switch on. Generally, when you touch them,
Every product manager should understand and
It is.
that's what the trend is.
It is.
It's really hard to
Can I
work.
connect with you just
Yeah.
to get
You
some
all can.
resume feedback or something like that?
Yeah.
We were developing
I have a
Thank you.
card.
for super crunchy. But
That's nice.
I have been a Scrum Master for
I mean, it's nice.
I was told to bring cards.
but
I don't actually usually have cards, so, but I only got them.
We definitely use it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to offer
optimize
back on the resumes or for you guys to show or see if there's a match.
But I have done my part.
Yeah. Part of the reason I got into this field is I used to, I was like consistently the person who helped people, friends, and people from my university find jobs. I was kind of like, I should start making money for doing it. So I work. It's a little bit more fun. Like my network's a lot better here now. So like startups, it's pretty cool because we have our venture capital and so all the these things that have invested in our
Every hour.
have
And
access
it's
to
not
the
just a static data.
so I can get on Slack.
This is the question
Where
you
we
should
have like
be
a
asking.
Slack for the VC that we have. We're like, hey, everyone on Touchpoint Metrics, here's a resume for someone that
Because the stream is coming.
Glad to go out to a lot of companies. That's really yeah, it's a nice tool.
Even that happen at 9 a.m. I'm gonna come first. Even at 9:05 can come first.
So what's something that we can have on our link that like they can stand out?
That might
more
like
than somebody has to
Yeah. So generally, like I said, we look for keywords. I know you gotta sometimes take a little bit like a robot. Be like, okay, this is the type of job I want. Look at a job description for it, distill what the keywords are, put that in your resume. That's kind of how I say it. You know, word clouds, things, so like, you know, how you create them, they like assess the frequency of words, and words get bigger based on the frequency of them. I generally say your word cloud for your resume match the word cloud for the job description. Really, like it should. That's this like whole we keep talking about mirroring. I don't know why, but it's a good practice.
Yeah,
It's really. And then the other thing I would say is projects. Link to your projects. Link to your email also. So if I'm on LinkedIn and I like someone's profile, I tend not to email them. Use LinkedIn's email service. I don't really like it very much. I tend to look for people's emails. And when you're job searching, put your email on there. When you're not, take it off. Because people won't email you all the time. So you have to be able to turn it off. But make it so that people, if they want to reach you, it's and put a link to projects, or if your project is too complex to put up, you know, repository or something like that, then blog about it, or write a piece about it. Our engineers really need to practice that.
So you're doing the right stuff, I think. Just
sorry, or maybe somebody's scraping it, or do you actually for the keywords?
We search using the keywords. So we use advanced like Boolean strings. It's like and/or type statements that piece together profiles that match what we think is the criteria. I mean, generally it's never perfect science, but you know, I can generally piece together a search like that. Machine learning and data scientists that use the libraries that we're using, or have, you know, certain types of degrees or whatever. Yeah. I sometimes get this question, find me. It's like what I'm supposed to be able to do.
One question I'll ask you is, what is your turnout in a candidate? Like apart from if a person doesn't manage for position in the company, what is the next turnout? Yeah, like okay, no, this is not. Personality wise, or the way they speak, like something. I'm sure there is something, some switch in recruiters which suddenly turn off by the candidate. And from a candidate point of view, I don't know what's that.
It's hard. I mean, we're human, right? Like, there's sometimes it just depends on the day. And like, sometimes I don't want to talk to you. I'm tired, and I'm on my 10th call of the day, and I'm over it. Like, it's totally one of those things where we sometimes forget how these things are on both sides. I know we had a candidate the other day who did really well, and then his last two interviews he had. Like, what's going on? I like followed up with him, and he was like, yeah, I was not feeling good. So I forced us to bring it back. He actually didn't end up passing, but he definitely did better than that first time. It's just like he literally hit some exhaustion point, and maybe like I think he just had recovered from a cold and like just wasn't back to where he was. I always remind people for on-site interviews, take great advice. Anyway, for phone screens, I think one of the things that people fall for a lot is not engaging properly. What I mean by that is if you go on a 7-minute rant about something, I sometimes it becomes a thing. I mean, you would really have to be willing to talk for 7 minutes straight and have me appreciate it. Because I think, and there's a lot of people that do it. They like grab onto something, I don't know why. They just talking. I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to be rude. I sometimes do, because if I know that like there's a good value there, I'll try to get you back on track. But it's worth recognizing those moments at least. I mean, like, is this something that's relevant to you? Like, is this helpful for you? So it's like do a check every now and then. I even tell like I feel like I'm giving you guys tips like in our interviews, but it's important to remember to stop sometimes and make sure that you're not going to take your standards. So there, you're like, you understand what I'm saying? Is it relevant to what you mean? That's probably a personal thing. I'd say. Someone telling me, right? I'm tired. I'm like, I'm having trouble keeping up. And they don't even care if I'm listening. I haven't even said anything. Like,
Sometimes it's really nervous.
yeah, I know. Yeah, I get it. I've been there on the opposite side too. That's the thing. And that's why I try to stay human. But my goal with these tips like that is always try to insert some type of routine. So just a pause, right? And say like, is this making sense to you? Is this relevant to you? Because that'll at least allow me to be like, yeah, that's really interesting. So actually, I want to dig into this other thing.
Right, we switch.
Well, I used to do.
Are we switching?
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, of
because I
course.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate you. I think you had great questions. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, feel free to ask questions. I mean, I still have some time. If you have a question,
before it runs out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever people have time. Hey, I guess.
Yeah. How is your HR org right now?
3.
Really? Yeah. You got the ad?
Yeah.
And recruiter? Or?
Yeah, I have me and I have a recruitment office manager / recruiting coordinator.
Awesome. Just asking.
Yeah.
HR background.
Yeah.
Right
Well,
here.
and we have a sourcer also, but he's in India. And I've worked with him for 5 years. And he's like, yeah, he's amazing. I adore the guy. He's really good at what he does.
How did you get in contact with him?
I was working, so when I wrapped up my startup, I started working with this friend on essentially recruiting for all these different startups, and we had to create incredible volume. Essentially what we were trying to do was create like a Pandora for recruiters. So the idea was, you would essentially like, you'd say you're a CEO for a company you're trying to hire. We would send you profiles every day, and you'd say thumbs down, thumbs up. And
Kind of like a Tinder for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But once we got to about a 90% thumbs up rate, then you would stop sending you candidates unless we had already reached out to them and they were interested in the opportunity. So it flips from being like to talking about whether you like the candidate or not to here's candidates that qualified, probably we base that on like learning what your preferences, and then they're interested. And so like you're ready for a conversation, it's easy to go, which is a lot easier than like what I do, for instance, which is I reach out to a bunch of people. Some people aren't interested, some people are interested. I have to go through it again, decide if they're really truly qualified, and then talk to them.
Right.
So I was working with him, and we needed like all these sourcers to create a lot of volume, and they had to be able to learn preferences based on feedback we were getting. And this guy was really good at it. So he was one of the people I found. Yeah.
So, what are you guys using as your ATS?
Google Hire, which is new. Google created an ATS. And it's interesting. We signed up for it, and now we realized the benefit, and they didn't tell us this, is when you search for a job on Google now, they have their ads, like Indeed, whatever.
Yeah.
And then before the regular search results, they have a little widget that has jobs on it, and that's through Google. So it essentially puts you in the top 3 results of Google, which is really
Just for
awesome.
having it.
Yeah, just for having it. It's a really huge part. Yeah.
No, that's all right. Yeah.
If you're ever hiring for people
Yeah.
or HRIS,
My God, I would love that.
that would be what I'm trying to get into.
That's a great one. Google has really good, they have a great deal.
Yeah,
But
just
I have
hire
cards.
people.
I brought a ton of them. So if you guys want to reach out to me, totally feel free. I'm happy to give out advice, talk about jobs. And you know, if anything, just refer you guys to people that I know. We don't have a perfect match for you guys. So yeah,
right.
I was just telling this group over here, like we have a good venture capital network, so we can refer people very easily to our portfolio. So like Redpoint and Menlo Ventures have huge portfolios. And I could easily blast your resumes out to that whole group in like no matter what sector. Yeah.
So even like because I just like one data scientist.
Yeah.
I'm not there
No.
yet.
No, so we have
Or is it like they actually look for data?
don't trust the job board completely because we have like 8 jobs that need approval and we don't put in an example for it.
So you're like, we don't need this person.
We're a little bit behind on that.
I figure that's the case in startup world.
It happens a lot. It's just, we like getting a job officially just kind of a task in itself. So it's always a lot. But like I'm already starting to hunt for some of them. So like I know what you guys want. I don't care if the wording is off. Like I know what we can do. So yeah. Yeah.
I got a question. So right now, is there a stage where you guys still try to hire people that have a lot of hats? Or
Yeah, I was just telling them. So we actually have about 3 data positions. We have a data scientist role, a data analyst, and a data engineer role. But in reality, we're probably trying to hire 2 people that can do this and can do that. So we don't know what that's going to look like. There is a good amount of flexibility. So definitely a lot of hats. I do all sorts of creative stuff for the company. And sometimes I'm like, I was telling them actually, the like big difference I think between big companies and small companies will be like, big companies will be like, here's what you're working on. For us, we'll be like, here's what you're working on. You'll hate some of this stuff down here because you're gonna be like, why am I doing this? But then you get to do this really advanced stuff. So the good comes with the bad.
kind of used to that because that's pretty much what my best job is.
Yeah.
For like a web developer,
Yeah.
a company which is like one web developer. That's me.
Well, you have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely where we're at. Lots of hats. And the expectation is that if you can come in and bring more value than just the original position, it's going to be really far.
Right.
Well, I need to get going, but I'll definitely try to message you on
Yeah,
that.
of course. Yeah. Feel free to ask me and shoot me an email or whatever.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Have a good one. Nice to meet you.
My
Questions?
Hi. Dan?
Yeah,
Nice
to meet you. So, I got working for a startup. Well, I got how is it like to be like working for a startup? Like, what are some like difficulty applying for a startup to get a job at startup compared to applying for a job like not?
Yeah. What's the challenge in that? Like how do you get
Yeah,
it?
because most of the time I don't really know them as startup.
Yeah.
It's hard to find startup jobs because
Yeah. Well, it's not that different, I can't give you like any like universal great tip. It's part of it's where you're looking. I told them I highly recommend AngelList as a job board for startups. It's free, and it has a lot of people on it, and it's good search functionality. So for recruiters, for young companies, it's a great resource because like LinkedIn costs you like a couple $1,000 just to post a job. So like I'm not going to post jobs on LinkedIn. And then Indeed is okay. There's certain places you can look, but Indeed doesn't have a lot of startups on it. I think it's like pretty much it. So that's where you're looking is one thing, and then other than that, I just it's the normal stuff. You'll have a phone screen, you'll have a test of some sort. And you have to know what's relevant to that position to be ready for it. I think the data scientist we just hired did his references. We've gotten like to the final round of 6 different companies before he got to us. But he never stopped trying to figure out what he's doing. And so when he finally got to us, he had learned everything he needed to be successful in the position. But it's exactly what he was saying about Jack Ma. He took all this rejection, but he forced himself to continue to learn. And unfortunately, I think that's just sometimes how it goes. You know, especially for these types of positions where it requires technical abilities and understanding of libraries and problems and how do you solve different problems. You gotta taking it from a high level understanding to applying it and then implementing it requires an understanding that you can only get through conversing with the people who are familiar with the problem, right? So if you can meet with, if you know people at a startup, or you can meet people at a startup, get coffee with them, just learn what problems they're facing, and then take that and relearn what you need to learn, relearn, or dig into it, open a book that relates to the problems that they talk about, and figure out how you can be that solution person for them, right? How you can provide the solution they need. That's the best advice I can really give you, because otherwise it depends on how companies, what their test is. I know what our test is, but I don't know what it is for other companies. It's very yeah. You guys have anything else for me?
I guess kind of a weird question. One really pertains to me. So I have some like good experience in jobs that I can't really put on my resume. Actually, I can't really put on my LinkedIn. I put on my resume. And so like when recruiters like talk about these jobs, like how do I bring it up? Because I can't really put it on LinkedIn because people find it. It's like crudely okay, so if somebody finds it, they might like try and like wrap their family basically. Yeah. So it's kind of like a weird problem. Which I'm not.
Yeah.
It's not really something that I know, but I mean, I'm just kind of like doing something where like you're just like a lot of these online trolls. Like they find my
No, so I was there.
yeah. So how would I talk about that? I mean, it's such a weird question. I know, but you're an HR guy, so I think you might have an idea.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of people that are like, yeah, I worked on this thing, it's not on my resume anymore, it's not very whatever, but I had this great experience, so you can always talk to them. I think that they would take it. Yeah, I mean, what you can't do is also, you can not put it on that thing, put it on the recruiters go, and they might check your resume, and they might eventually see that there's a difference between the two, but I'm used to resumes having a little bit different information.
Okay, that's good. That's like very helpful.
Yeah, so I think resumes don't make it a publicly available resume. Right. That'd be my best solution. Yeah. At some point they'll ask you for a resume, and then you can have it, and you can speak to it. Right.
That does help quite a bit. Yeah, it's a weird problem.
Yeah.
And like I didn't really expect myself to have this problem. Can I see that?
Yeah.
That doesn't work
like an industry background. So I work in the education system. I actually work in CSS as a researcher. So like if I apply to like you guys company. So basically, I mean, they have an automatic screening, right? So the people like if they don't have like a degree in computer science or anything that related, they would just throw out resume. How about like even I avoid it. I mean, if I have a really good portfolio, I need to get interviews to show off my skills, right?
Yeah, you're talking about how to avoid the automated system.
Yeah.
I mean, people do it all the time. The problem is once you get past the automated review, then when in person looks at it, they'll figure it out. Like it happens with me all the time. People that go to boot camps will put like, whatever school they went to and they studied biology, and then it says like, I don't know, some boot camp and it says computer science under it. And it's clear that they're trying to say that they have a computer science degree, but it's from a boot camp and it's not quite the same. So you can like add that in. you just have to back it up. Because if I look at it and I like see someone does that, and I'm like, you only listed projects and you don't have experience, or your projects have no relevancy, and you whatever, it's like I'll generally just like push it aside. I get why people do it, but it also sometimes feels like a lie. So you have to really, it's a dangerous balance where I think some people go, this is not considered science, like next try. So it is a little tough. We don't, most small companies don't have any like screening. Bigger companies do, I know that. So yeah, maybe you make 2 resumes. That's what I would do. Have one for the smaller companies, have one for the bigger ones. Bigger ones say it's like computer science or whatever, like, and see if it goes through, and if it's a smaller one, I probably wouldn't do it.
So people normally like to add on to this, what you said. People normally
I wrote that line.
just get to the ATS.
The
resume. So I have seen that people doing it and trying to match the job description exactly, and that's what I think sometimes the company calls. Like,
yeah, no, I told them that. I mean, word cloud, word cloud takes all the words in a document, and then the words that are repeated most are biggest. I do think that, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I have made point.
So the word cloud for a resume and job description should be set, right? They should somewhat match. That makes sense.
So at the end, someone is trying that, just like.
Well, they don't do it, but if someone's, if I'm doing it, I'm looking for the certain words to be repeated a similar amount. Not exactly. I'm not like, it's not a science. So if you're, but yeah, I mean, if you're looking at a job and you're like, oh well, I did use SQL for that past job, but I didn't list it for my resume. Like update it, change it for a certain job.
No, but say you have like bare minimum requirements for a job, but still the job will need you to have some specialized experience and whatnot. But people do change it, like change the job description to match the resume, to match in job description. So you're, even though you don't have it, how good is that?
You can't lie about it. If you can make it match more, but you can't lie. If you lie, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, of course, but that's what the point is. So why even have that instead of just like having someone like not having human intervention is also not
no, they do though. So it's automated for. I don't know why big companies do automated screenings. I've never worked for one, but I think it's just because they get too many jobs.
And understanding how to put the data in, not creating mumble jumble because
cater to just like one job.
Understanding
Change it
the
moment you're like applying for some other job. So like every job has to have one resume.
Well, that tends to be what I do. So if I'm job hunting, I don't necessarily personalize it for a specific job description for a certain company.
I can give up one.
I'll be like, okay, like when I was looking at a recruiter or HR analyst or HR generalist, and I had the resume for each of them, and they were only slightly different. I mean,
That's Noel.
but and it's also fair that most people like. I can't write all my experience without having and everything I've done without having an 8-page resume.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have to cut it down, and what you cut it down to is depends on the job. And it gets tiring, by the way, maintaining multiple resumes, but you only have to do it when you're job hunting.
The job hunting itself is like such a strenuous process with the science programs.
It's not easy.
It's like 2 full-time jobs.
Oh, yes. We already know what we already know it's not
I heard Python, you know,
Okay.
Those people, you should try.
We're still here.
It happens. MongoDB is the one thing that people do. So these are the things that people will contact you. If you do not have these things, sure. If you do not have like Python, MongoDB, people will.
I like MongoDB.
Yeah, MongoDB is really good. Python, MongoDB, iSQL. These are 3 things you should know.
Wait, did we already talk about the R versus Python debate? We already have that
Well,
one.
I don't want to do it right now. I have a hard stop at 4:30.
I'm sticking to Python. Why do you have to have a debate?
But if you know R, it's good. A lot of companies are opening or R-like stuff, but you need to understand how would you use that. It's not just with R. You need to know how does it apply, and how does it apply to the big data work, right? How does R, since you're talking about R, how does R work with Spark? Do you either Sparkly or Spark R or something like that. So, but again, knowing, understanding Spark, not Spark, I would say Python, MongoDB, and Tableau if you want to do that visualization stuff side. But HiveSQL, you should have it. It's great. It's a good combination. Nobody can beat you. At least you will just say that. My experience at the cost of just changing this my at least at this point. That's give me an opportunity. Because that's how I started. I mean, not everybody knows the answer to all the questions, but you need to show the willingness that you will be able to do extra step, reach out, and get the answer.
Visualization. I know it's going to say D3, so we could learn D3 a little bit.
Well, that's a whole new world. I don't know if you guys are willing to go towards like UI engineer, because that's where you can certainly do that, but that's a whole new. No, not a full stack. So my team is small. So the company is big, but again, the team we are working. So we are setting up our entire new big data team. So there are two schools of thought. One is right. One is people tend to build or buy. Some of the stuff we are building, like core Hadoop, we want to invest in that. So I'm building that. Yeah. But maybe visualization, we don't want to build that right now. So we have it. So, because visualization, I feel like it takes a lot of time, and you need really good hands with JavaScript closure. So that's if you're willing to go that way, it's up to you. That also has a very bright future. But at this point of time, I think it's all about going towards all about deep learning and do.
Guys, we need to leave the room. I'm so sorry.
No. But guys, feel free to reach out. You can search me on LinkedIn. I will leave my information with Pawan. Contact me anytime LinkedIn is open.